Okay, it looks like we're about ready, so I'm going to go ahead and officially introduce Dr. Roger Lear. Dr. Lear has been doing research into the field of alien implant research for at least, I would say, close to 20 years. He can give us the exact numbers. I've known Dr. Lear for around 12 years myself personally, and have been watching his research as a big fan. And as many of you might know, he does have a worldwide following. He speaks in every continent in the world, and has been doing very esoteric research into the topics of alien implant research and alien abductions. And as you'll see, he has a very scientific approach, and his data speaks for itself. So without further ado, please let me introduce Dr. Roger Lear.
Thank you, Jason. Yes, it has been a few years, Jason. I've watched this young man grow from a young boy into an absolute genius within one.
Oh man, you're killing me.
And I've watched him aspire to great things. Years ago, he came to me, recommended by another young fellow who said, you know, you need a webmaster to set up a website for you. And I have just the man to do that. His name is Jason Martell. So many years ago, Jason Martell set up my original website, which is still there today, The Aliens and the Scalpel, or alienscalpel.com. That's where the word came from, was from the first book that I wrote, The Aliens and the Scalpel. So alienscalpel with one S.com. You'll find it all, and it is as he originally designed it. Of course, with modifications and with modernization. Now, the subject I have to talk to you about, unfortunately, is after lunch. Not the best time, probably, to talk about certain subjects, but we'll show you very little, and if anything makes you a little queasy, why just look away and it will all shall disappear. What I'm going to present to you today is some of the latest material that we have garnered on the subject of alien implants. Now maybe for some it's hard to conceive that there are intelligences that have been visiting this planet for hundreds, thousands, or perhaps millions of years. But if you have that concept ingrained in your consciousness, then obviously they're coming here from somewhere, and we don't like to really put a finger on where that somewhere could be. Are they extraterrestrials that are from another planet within our solar system, other solar systems, other galaxies? Are they travelers through dimensions? Do they live in a different dimension? Are they time travelers? Or are they all of the above? It's not without human logic and reason to consider the fact that if you're thousands of years advanced in science over what we are on this tiny little planet, then you have concepts of the universe and an intelligence and a science which far exceeds our own. So maybe there are things that we can't even conceive of that these intelligences can do. One of the things that has become evident is that there are vehicles that are coming here, and obviously they are because they've been seen all over the world. They've been depicted in the world's human recorded literature. They've been depicted in paintings and cave carvings and so on. As we know, they're biblical, they're traditional, they're religious, they're ingrained in our history. And some of them look the same as what we see today. But is it a stretch then to describe the vehicle? Is it a stretch to look at what's driving that vehicle and what it might be doing here on this planet? Well, I suppose it is. So some of the things that I'm going to talk about might be quite inconceivable, but I try and stay with as much as we know as the academic science fact. Now, academic science can be a tool for good, and it can be a tool for destruction. Always remember what happened to folks like Copernicus and Galileo. They weren't treated very well. To structure a rift through the core of academic science is a leap. And it's very easy to fall into that crevasse and have the entire structure cave in on you. So I try and stay with the scientific fact, but yet we have to deal with the human aspect of all of this because, as I said, these intelligences are interacting with the human race, and they have been for a long time. Now, what is the program that's going on? We know about alien abduction, and at least some of you may believe it, and perhaps some don't, or if you at least consider it, please consider it more as a fact than a fantasy. I've been in 42 countries in 7 years. It's not much difference whether you're in Egypt or Hong Kong or in South America or in Israel or the United States. The same sort of things go on that you hear being talked about by David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins and Yvonne Smith. These interactions, by and large, involving the taking of ova and sperm, which to me indicates at least some kind of a genetic program going on. Now, since the status quo has kept us in the dark, and we have been kept in the dark, we don't know what we are. We don't know where we came from. In fact, I've been saying lately that basically I think we live in a hologram. Because you get up in the morning, and who are you going to listen to, and who are you going to believe? What you hear on the radio? On George Norrie? You're going to listen to the television set? You're going to believe the newspapers? When they tell you the stock market is doing one thing and the oil prices are doing something else? You're going to believe in your cash and your investments? You're going to believe that in the disease, the swine flu, to get a shot, not to get a shot? How do you know what to believe? So basically we live in a hologram, and we've been kept that way for many, 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 many years. So we don't know where we came from, and we don't know what we're doing here. We don't know what our purpose is. But whatever it is, our record really hasn't been that good. So maybe there's some entities or intelligences that have come here and have interfered with us or are responsible for us that are returning. And believe me, I don't have the answers, and if anybody gets up here and tells you they do, put a finger in each ear and run as fast as you can. Because it's way, way too complex, and it's too multi-layered. So we just try and chip away at the layers, and that's what I've been doing through the use of academic science. Now, remember, scientists, like everybody else, have a job, and unfortunately, most of them pray to higher masters. So they don't come out and tell you the truth. Now, when programs you see on the History Channel, such as UFO Hunters, and you see me on there, I'm not on there to present scientific work. Don't be fooled, and don't be fooled by the program. And I'll tell you right up front, it's entertainment. It's the entertainment business. So why do I do it? Greed. I do it because it generates some income, and I take the whole sum of that income and I put it into A&S Research, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and then we use it to do some tests and come out with some legitimate material. And that's what I use, and that's what I've been reporting on. Now, just last week, some of you may know, some of you may not know, that amongst a few others, Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, and myself, at a press conference at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. And Edgar Mitchell, again, told the world that the Roswell event in 1947 was the crash of a non-terrestrial vehicle with a crew, and it has been kept secret by your government since 1947. Well, that got out, and it went around the world, and it held on for a few days. And then by the time they got to me, the only thing that I saw basically on CNN was Dr. Lear got up and asked the audience how many had ever seen a UFO, and about 100 people raised their hands. And then he said, how many people thought they were related to the alien abduction program, and about 5 people raised their hands. And then he asked how many people were abducted and never returned, and that got him some laughter. So that's what I saw on CNN. But none of what I'm going to tell you today was on CNN. And I'm going to just sum up right away in the beginning. So you see, if you want to cut the whole lecture short, I'm just going to tell you what it is right now. You can leave. Simple. Get it all in one big nutshell. What we found basically is that some of the latest material I've been working on has material in it which is non-terrestrial. That means it doesn't come from this planet. Not only is it non-terrestrial, but science, not me. So if you don't like the message, don't shoot the messenger. But science, academic science tells us that it may not be even from this solar system. So people who allege alien abduction and wind up with objects in their bodies, and we feel maybe there's about 15%, and when we look at these objects on a scientific level, we will see that they have materials in them which are not from this world. So therefore, if someone is a legitimate abductee, and believe me, these people are not looking for fame or fortune, they'd rather hide in the closet even to admit to themselves that they are victims of this kind of a circumstance. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Okay. Now, you know that John Mack, in his book, first book, Abduction, talked about the 7 traumas of abduction. You know, and only one of them is the act of abduction itself. But when you try and think about it, you know, who are you going to tell? Who are you going to tell you've been abducted? Somebody you've worked with? You're going to say, I was abducted by alien planet. Woo! No, you don't do that. So who are you going to tell? Who's going to console you? What kind of a group are you going to get with? Who's going to believe you? Lots of traumas involved. And then on top of all this, we have objects being placed into your bodies which you didn't ask for, and we don't really know what they do. But they are some type of device which puts out a radio frequency that someone can receive, and perhaps it's not just intelligences from elsewhere, perhaps it's some folks that are working with these people also, and so again, it gets to be complex. So let's go right on with the presentation. This case that we've done is the 15th case. We'll call him John Smith for a pseudonym. I think that's a pretty good, there's lots of John Smiths around. 47 years old, he's married, and he has 3 children. Just a really normal kind of guy. He resides in Southern California. And in this case, this is the first one we've had where the gentleman himself is a physical scientist. Never had one before. The 14th case was a retired naval intelligence officer. We thought that was pretty strange and unusual. But to have actually a physical scientist involved, that's really something else. He has a positive history of abduction, and this is continuous. It's still going on, and you might ask, well, when these things are removed, does it continue? And in short, yes. The area of concern physiologically is the second toe of the left foot. Now, we look at these cases in a scientific way, and preoperatively, is the object viewable somehow, or how do we accept these cases in the first place? They have to have something which appears on an x-ray or a CAT scan, so this fellow had both. Now, description, this one was about 3 to 5 millimeters in length, and it's about as dense and round as a pencil lead, and it was located in the second toe of the left foot. And an estimated duration since February 28th of 2008. And you say to yourself, well, how can you be so exacting? This guy remembered. He remembered when it was put in. He didn't remember all the details, but he remembered, and he remembered waking up in the morning and finding a few spots of blood on the bed sheet. And was there a scar? No, as in all the other cases, there was no portal of entry, no scar formation. We did some, as we usually do, some testing. We use a Gauss meter, and on the Gauss meter, we registered in this case about 10 milligauss. That's a fairly strong magnetic field. We used a Geiger counter to determine if there was any radiation being emitted. There was none. There was, yes, a radio frequency emission, and here you can see the frequencies were in the 14.7 megahertz range and the 17.6 gigahertz range. Now, as to where these frequencies lie and to what they do, we don't know exactly yet what these are. We're investigating it now. Also, let me diverge for just a second and say that this is a work in progress. I'm giving you information as it's being reported. You're hearing this, and the folks that are getting this on the net are getting the latest information. And even the scientific information and conclusions that we have drawn is a work in progress. We will have more as time comes. Once we determined he was a candidate for surgery and he wanted the surgery done, we selected a date, and that was September the 6th of 2008. It was filmed, as we do with all of them, with still photography and with a videographer. So we have multiple eyewitnesses. We have multiple means of showing this, that it actually did occur, and this was not staged. We had X-ray assisted devices, which we must use in order to keep us from spending all day in a small area trying to look for a needle in a haystack, because these objects are very small. The one we use is a C-arm. It's an active X-ray device which puts out a very low level of radiation, and you can view the object on 2 television screens. When you view the object, you can also see where you insert an instrument into the moon, how close you're getting to the object, and if you have it within your grasp. But it's not as easy as it looks, believe me. The general surgeon on this case was one of the members of our ANS research surgical team. He's a general surgeon, Dr. John Matriciano. He's done a number of these cases with me. He's in Thousand Oaks, California. I was the assistant on this case, although there was a toe, and I usually do toes. But now the surgeries have become more complex, and the routine, I'm much better serving as an agent to sort of show what happens during the surgery and make sure things happen in the right order. So I can't always be there, assisting in the surgery. So I pop in and pop out from time to time. All our anesthesia is local by injection. We use 2 types, a quick-acting anesthesia mixed with a long-acting anesthesia. Now, in this case, when visible on an X-ray, we saw, as I said, a small metallic rod. But when it came out in parts. It broke apart. So we had a multiplicity of fragments of this object, and we took the objects as they came out, and instead of placing them directly into a container, which is the patient's own blood serum, we put it onto a sterile drape. And then afterwards, we took the particles off the sterile drape and then transferred it to a container of blood serum. Here's some views showing some things that were going on. Anybody recognize this gentleman here? Whitley Strieber, yes. Whitley was kind enough to be there, and with his guidance. We had a lot of this filmed for a program which we expected to air on A&E, but guess what?
It got canceled.
Yeah, it got canceled. It's in the can, and they won't show it. Why? Because we had in our contracts that this would not be shown with debunkers and skeptics. And we stuck to it. And we said, no, we're not going to change our mind. They paid over $100,000 budget to have this done. And there it sits, folks. You probably never will see it. This is a device for radio frequency detection. That's what we use. Here's what I was talking about, the scanning device called the C-arm. You see there's two television screens. It's probably hard to see, but I'm pointing at the object on one of the television screens. Again, in this light, it's a little difficult to see, but the object is here adjacent to the bone and the toe, and it's a little difficult not only in this light, but because of the X-ray view there to see it. I'm not showing you this to make you ill. It just depicts what we usually see during the surgery. Now, the objects have been transferred into a container, and this is a container of blood serum. And I remember these came out in very small little pieces. We didn't expect that to happen because it is metal, and with a high electromagnetic field around it, we thought it would pretty much stay together. Now, I'm going to diverge for just a second. One of the things that happened in this case, which, found quite interesting. After 48 hours, we keep these samples refrigerated because, let's face it, there's biological and metallurgical components to it. After 48 hours, I took this specimen container out of the refrigerator and I looked at it. And I noticed, first of all, that these little tiny particles that we had carefully placed in the specimen container had changed color. They'd now become dark, very dark. And not only that, but they had begun to aggregate in formation as it was when it was depicted in the X-ray. And I was so shook up by seeing this, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I said, well, maybe this is just some kind of a crazy electromagnetic artifact because these are contained in a plastic container and there might be an electrostatic charge on the container. So I shook them all up again and I watched how they kind of floated back down and re-aggregated in the order that they were. So I said, wow. And I scratched my head and I said, I better get a videographer over here right away. So I had my cameraman come over and we filmed the container. We had never seen that before. So I'll take a little bit of divergence there just to give you that little detail. Now, this fellow lives in a single family dwelling, typical Southern California construction, chicken wire, and plaster, wrapping, interior plaster over wallboard. Now, if you're being abducted from the same place continuously over and over and over again, Wouldn't you think that someone might want to look at your house or the environment from which you're being abducted? But, you know, outside of Bud Hopkins and a few other people, nobody bothers. Oh, you know, the stories are great, so we'll just, you know, we'll print the stories. But there are physical aspects that go on. Now, the exterior of the home, there are magnetic anomalies that do occur. Now, the master bedroom wall, we looked at that and we found that there was, you know, some tremendous magnetic anomalies on the exterior of the wall. He had an avocado tree growing in the backyard, and when we put the Gauss meter on a branch of the avocado tree, the meter went off at 10 milligauss. Would you want to eat an avocado that came from that tree? I don't think so. Backyard soil will just spontaneously catch fire. Well, the first thing you think of, there got to be a gas leak here somewhere. So we called the gas company and had them come out and check. Guess what? No gas leaks. How about next door to the neighbors? Because he has neighbors. We went over there, their soil doesn't catch fire. But around this area of the avocado tree, it catches fire. So then we did an analysis on the soil, and we find that there was extremely high in bromine. Why? Not a clue. See, I don't have any answer, just to find it. Now, he had a fiberglass boat on a trailer sitting in the driveway. Since when does fiberglass become magnetic? Scratch. I don't know, but he's got a magnetic boat. Maybe the guy's just got a magnetic personality. He has a Cadillac, not a new one, because scientists don't drive new Cadillacs. It's an old one. Runs good though. And it was fairly magnetic. Now the interior. We went into the kitchen and we you know, looked at the counters and things, and we pulled out utensils from the drawers in the kitchen. They were all magnetic, and including wooden and plastic serving spoons that, you know, salad for serving salads and stuff. How do you get magnetic anomalies with wooden serving spoons? He had magnetic spoons. Kitchen cupboard hinges. When we took a simple compass and we went up and down the hinges, while the compass needle would just point directly to the hinge and would go away from north, magnetic north completely. We took the hinge off and we tried to find the other side and pole, but there wasn't any. But yet, unipoles don't exist, they say. Non-metallic kitchen counters, typical, you know, sort of Formica counters. They're magnetic. Interior of the master bedroom wall around the window had a nice big magnetic field that was below the window. And it corresponded to the magnetic field that was on the exterior of the window. Here's a diagram of the house that we made, and some of the magnetic anomalies. Here's some photos. Here's the famous avocado tree that you wouldn't want to eat the avocados off of.
The burning bush.
The burning bush, right? Really good for salads if you want, again, a magnetic personality. Soil that catches fire right here. Now, strangely enough, I already told you about the high bromine content. At the very same place on the interior wall of the bedroom, below the window, we shut off all the lights, and we have several frequencies of ultraviolet black light that we use. And we shine the ultraviolet black light on that area of highly magnetic indication. And we found that there were some fingerprints that were fluorescing with 4 small fingers. Fingerprints. So what we did was he's a nice guy. And, you know, he's married with 2 children. Well, you just don't go cutting a piece of your bedroom wall out, you know? What are you going to tell your wife? So she went away for the weekend, and he did. He cut the piece of the bedroom wall out and said there was, you know, a little white lie, kind of a leak, you know, through the window, so we had to cut the wall out. Well, we have this piece of the wall. We have it in a laboratory in Arizona now, and there's been a recent invention. It's a piece of tape, and the tape you can lay over and press down over an area, and when you peel the tape off of this area, guess what you have captured on the tape? DNA. So we're going to try and get a DNA analysis, and as I said, I'm presenting this to you as a work in progress. Here's another shot, very difficult to see in this type of light, but there are fingerprints here, 2 small 4-fingered hands. Now, I already went through this, telling you in advance what happened. You know, these small objects in the container changed color and began to aggregate. We took video of it so I can prove what I say. I try and do that every once in a while. Whoop. How do we do this, Jason?
Just click that little button. Hopefully we'll just magically start.
No?
No magic there.
Well, which button?
Yeah.
I could get a cursor back up here.
The pointer,
You'll
Jason.
find a bag
The pointer's in the middle.
in front of you. Doesn't last long, guys.
Now, because somebody else funded this, is it their proprietary footage?
Excuse
Is
me?
it their proprietary footage? Because somebody else funded the project?
It's all funded through our 501c3 nonprofit, A&S Research.
So then you could actually release the video that wasn't able to be played on A&E?
Yes, we have everything, but you know, it's not edited into a full story. Okay. Now we'll get into the kind of nuts and bolts. I was sitting next to Ed Mitchell at the press conference, and he's a real nice guy. And he can tell whatever it is that he tells. And Steve Bassett, who put on the X conference, came up and he said, Dr. Mitchell, you know what Dr. Lear is going to talk about. He's going to talk about implants, and you know, you're sort of a different event of this, you know, game, because you know you walked on the moon and you're an astronaut and so on. So if you like to not be involved with such things as alien abduction and implants, you're not going to insult anybody by being, you know, you're kind of a more nuts and bolts guy. You might want to, you know, leave the room. So Ed punches me in the arm. He says, "This is the nuts and bolts guy here, and I'm staying right here." So he was given his chance, but he didn't leave. Anyway, so we'll go into the nuts and bolts. This is scanning electron microscopy, and it's basically using an electron microscope to see what's going on in the metal. The EDX portion is an examination which gives you the elements that the object is made out of. ICP-MS is a test which looks for non-terrestrial or terrestrial isotopic ratios. If we look at uranium, for example, we find we all know what U-235 is because You know, we like to make a bomb out of it, but U-235 is an isotope of other isotopes. There's U-236, U-234, and so on. So that's an element which has more than one isotope to it. So if we look at the ratios of isotopes of elements as they exist on Earth, no matter where we mine them, they only vary around 2 to 3%. And so we have a chart, which is a chart of the natural abundance ratios. And so that's how we can tell, well, is this piece of iron we got, does it come from Mars, or does it come from the moon, or does it come from an asteroid or a meteorite? So if we have a known isotopic ratio which exists in one planetary body, we can identify that planetary body by where a piece of it came from. The Martian meteorite, which contained carbonaceous life, was known to come from Mars for 2 reasons. Because we knew some of the isotopic ratios of the constituency of the Martian rocks through photospectrometry, but we also know that it had trapped gases within the meteorite, and those trapped gases were the same equivalent as to what we find on Mars. So we can say that's, you know, a Martian meteorite. So isotopic ratios are very important, but they're very, very, very difficult to deal with because only certain machines will give you isotopic ratios within certain accuracies for certain elements, and that gets down to technicalities of what we call field emission and how big the beam is and what you're using for a gas to sputter off these elements. Optical microscopy is simply looking at something through a microscope and then giving you a picture of what it is. We also use AFM, which is atomic force microscopy. It's the most magnification that you can get without tearing into the object with an electron beam. Raman spectroscopy is another way to look at objects by bombarding it with a beam, and then you look at a spectrograph of what information comes off, which is computerized, and it can give you a great deal of information. Now here's a summary of the findings that we've found so far. We found meteoric iron, and this is indicated by the nickel-iron ratio. And when we go to a table of meteorites, we look under nickel-iron meteorites, and we see that there's a different ratio for the nickel and the iron than there would be for non-meteoric substances. So wherever the iron comes from in these objects, we can say it's meteoric. We look at the minor elements found in the sample, and they are rare on Earth and never found in the human body. Now here I list a great deal of them, and well, let's say iridium. Iridium is very, very, very rare on Earth. It's only found in approximately 1 to 2% of the Earth's crust, and probably does not come from here. It's probably a portion of the Earth that was bombarded by material from outside, our immediate zone. So iridium is not really a component of this planet. The other interesting thing, besides all these others which you don't really find in the human body and are rare on Earth, is we found only one isotope of uranium, and that's uranium-238. Uranium-238 basically can't exist by itself. So it would seem, that looking at all these and the nickel-iron ratio and other factors that we find, that this is a manufactured object, one that uses a form of very, very advanced nanotechnology. Isotopic ratios have been compared to known isotopic ratios of elements in our solar system, and they are not the same. So these objects, as I started out saying, we're full circle now, may not only be just extraterrestrial, but they may not come from the solar system. Now, I will add to this some things that are not shown on the slides, on this set of slides, and that's some of the other factors. How many know what carbon nanotubes are? Okay. 5 to 7 years ago, scientists were talking about carbon nanotubes, and there was a big argument going on whether they could exist, whether they couldn't exist, whether they could be made, whether they couldn't be made. Well, that problem has now been solved. We now know that we can make carbon nanotubes, and what Jose showed in this film, they're talking about space elevators. There's really a plan on the drawing board to build a space elevator out of carbon nanotubes. They are extremely strong, and you could build a structure that goes up, let's say, 5 miles into space, and launch a vehicle from there, and you would defeat the form of gravity. Japan is now using carbon nanotube technology to make carbon nanofibers, and predicts in the future they'll be able to make a clothing of carbon nanofibers, which you will be able to adjust. And for the ladies that want, a colored print dress on one day, you just really flip a switch and you'll have that dress, and it'll keep you warm in the winter and cool in the summer. So that's clothing of the future made from carbon nanofibers. Extremely strong. Carbon nanotubes, these devices are extremely small, a nanometer. I don't know how to compare it in size, but it's the size of the atomic structure. So if you can picture an atom, then you can picture what the nano sizes are. And the strength, we now know that these can be doped, and that means that you can put other elements in carbon nanotubes and you can make it have specific functions. One of the things that we found in these objects are carbon nanotubes and carbon nanofibers. One other thing that we found that I have to tell you about, and it's unfortunately not on the slides, are a set of crystals. These crystals are what we call orthorhombic sodium chloride crystals. We all know what sodium chloride is. It's salt. And you know that salt is crystalline, but when you look at crystalline salt, it forms crystals of all various configurations. So to find clear, concise, rectangular, varying size sodium chloride crystals is very, very rare. In fact, so rare as we don't see it at all. So that's another thing that we find is varying size orthorhombic sodium chloride crystals. Now, if we go way, way back to the early days of radio, we know that, what did we have? We had a crystal set, which was an earphone and a crystal and a battery and an antenna, and you got a radio station. We said, oh, this is marvelous. I can hear a radio station in my earphone, and it's all due to the crystal. And so that was the end of the magic, but nobody told us what was going on in the crystal so that the crystal could actually receive a radio station. It just said, oh, it vibrates at a certain frequency. Well, what is vibrating at the frequency? We know that all matter vibrates, and we know that all matter is energy, and energy is in packets, and yes, they do vibrate at varying frequencies. So again, this shows us that in the metallic implants that we have a very extremely advanced nanotechnological device, which is probably used for gathering information. And the last thing I want to add is that we found that the biological tissue, which I've been talking about for a number of years, that surrounds this object, we found it is now growing out of the metal. So this is a very, very advanced technology, and as far as I know, that it far exceeds, for what we know, is black budget technology. And I may have time, if it's okay with Jason, to just answer a few of your questions.
I had a question.
Sure.
Since there wasn't a point of entry in this car, there wasn't, you couldn't see anything, did they come to you with a symptom? Or how did you discover that?
Okay, our question for everyone was, if there was no scar, how do we know there's an implant there? Sometimes there is discomfort. Sometimes people will see an object below the skin. We had one that was a total biological object and it moved when you touched it. And it would go anywhere in a circle of about 2.5 inches in diameter. Others are found by accident. Auto accidents, skiing accidents. Fellow hit his thumb with a hammer, went and had an x-ray taken of his hand and arm, found a piece of metal in his arm, no scar again. So there's various ways that people find these. Some have memories. Some have very distinct memories of having something put in, and they'll go have an x-ray taken and they'll find there's an object there. Yes, sir.
I mentioned that the early crystal radios did not need a battery. There's no battery needed at all.
I stand corrected.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So, I mean,
They did not need an energy source.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just kind of trying to picture out of my head what an early crystals that looked like, because I remember I ran a wire down between the grass and lawn and the sidewalk, and had my little crystal there, and my little copper coil on an earphone. I was trying to think, was there a battery there or not? But yeah, it was even more primitive than that, so you really didn't need an energy source. But these objects do need an energy source, because when they're unplugged from the body, they don't work anymore. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know what Morgellons disease is?
Yes, I know what Morgellons disease is, and I get a lot of emails in relation to Morgellons disease. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it has a relationship to this. I can tell you about one case, and please don't misconstrue what I had to say. I've been talking about the Gary Lowry case for years. He came down a few years ago and had 2 black spots on his arm. They were there overnight. He didn't know what they were. They weren't bothering him physiologically. They were bothering him psychologically. He didn't have them before he went to bed, woke up in the morning when I'm there. I didn't know what they were. I looked at them under a microscope, couldn't tell what they were, so I said, well, let's just try something. Let's cut the air supply off. Excuse me. So we covered them up with tape and waited a few days, and they just loosened them up, and we peeled them off on a piece of tape. Then I took them and looked at them under an optical microscope, and they had these same little flagellations that you see when you see what Morgellons slides look at, with all kinds of fibers and some kind of a gelatinous mass. So I just put them in my gray basket, like Stan Friedman has to say, and I didn't think any more about them because I didn't know what they were. And then when the talk about Morgellons disease, I saw some of the slides of Morgellons on television, and they looked very similar. So that's it. That's all I know. I don't know whether there's any relationship or not. Yes, sir.
Rod, do you want to take some questions from the web after this one too?
Sure.
Can you tell me what the DNA tape technology is source for it? Who does it, or?
There's a fellow by the name of John Rao, R-A-O. If you want to see me afterwards, I can give you his number. He's the one that owns a couple of biotech companies, and he was the one that was able to find this source for the tape.
Okay, Roger, here's a question from a web user. Do you think any of the abductions go through generations of families?
Do I think the abductions go through generations of families? Absolutely unqualified, yes. We've got many cases reported by abduction researchers all over the world that indicate this is the case.
Another question, has anyone ever monitored the frequencies from the implants?
Has anyone ever monitored the frequencies? One of the things that we did with one of these cases, we were able to isolate a frequency. I sent the frequency into Bigelow Aerospace, and he was kind enough to fax I use that word, fax me back a chart. And on the chart was a list of frequencies, and one of them had a circle around it, a range of frequencies, and it turned out to be a fixed or mobile deep space communications frequency.
Okay, one more question from the web. Let's see here. Are abductions more frequent where crop circles are?
Are abductions more frequent where crop circles are found? That's an interesting question. And to answer that honestly, I would say I don't know, but that should be something that should be looked into. One of the things that I mentioned years ago that has never been looked into is where there are flaps of UFO sightings. I would think that somebody by now would have mapped out an area where we find a big UFO flap. Are more abductions occurring? Maybe someday someone will do that. Thank you.